Good morning, everyone. I just wanted an indication if everyone's back, but if you're still logging in, walking back to your desk with your coffee, that's perfectly fine. I've just started the recording again and happy to announce that we are starting with session 3. I am Clarissa Robertson, so I will facilitate the session. This session after the presenters have done their presentations, but I have the awesome privilege of introducing you to Prof. Anita van der Merwe and Prof. Teresa Burgess from UCT, Prof. Anita from Stellenbosch University, of course. So I'll just go ahead and read their very lengthy bios, so please bear with me. Prof. Anita van der Merwe, Professor Emeritus Anita van der Merwe holds a PhD in nursing and an honours degree in philosophy, and she chairs one of the 2 equivalent health research ethics committees at Stellenbosch University, and she's a member of the Senate Research Ethics Committee. She's been recently appointed by the Minister of Health to serve on the National Health Research Ethics Council till the end of 2023. So well done, Prof. Anita. And she served on and chaired the HREC 2 for a number of years and has been instrumental in developing the SU HREC guidelines for research in emergencies in the time of COVID. And she also participated in the discourse around the implications of the Poppy Act in health research ethics at the Faculty of Medicine and Health Sciences at Stellenbosch University. And then Prof. Teresa Burgess, she is the associate professor and started her career with a BSc in physiotherapy, and she followed that up with a BSc and PhD in exercise science. So, and all from the University of Cape Town. So in 2011, she was awarded an NIH Poverty Fellowship in Bioethics, and with this support successfully completed an MHSC of Bioethics at the University of Toronto in 2012. So she is part of the HREC Bioethics Leadership Program and is registered for a second PhD in clinical and research ethics. So welcome to all of our attendees. Welcome to our presenters. Just wanted to check whether Prof. Anita, Prof. Burgess, hi Prof. Burgess, whether you would like to or are able to share your presentations with us on the screen.
Thanks so much, Clarissa, for those very kind and generous introductions, much appreciated. I just want to check in with Prof. Anita that I'm up first, I think. So I will go ahead and share my screen.
Correct.
Thank you, Prof. Anita. All right, sorry, are you seeing that in slideshow mode? Is it fine?
Yes, it's visible. Thank you, Prof.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks so much. Good morning, everyone. It's really great to be at another of our annual Western Cape Health Research Ethics Committee workshops. And just thank you so much to all of the wonderful speakers and sessions this morning. It's a great privilege for me to be involved and to just briefly share some of the work we've been doing. I would just really like to acknowledge Prof. Anita and just to say thank you so much to Clarissa for all of her support and help in organising the session. So the real purpose of this session is to have some interaction around the sort of health and well-being of Research Ethics Committee members, especially after COVID-19. And when Prof. Anita and myself were thinking about the session, we thought it might be nice just to sort of situate the discussion a little bit around some of the empirical work we've been doing. And many of you very kindly, well, when I say many, a number of people, I think in the audience, and very kindly, were able to contribute to some of our research around COVID-19. And we undertook a study looking at a thematic analysis of the views and experiences of health research ethics committees in South Africa during COVID-19. And just to acknowledge my supervisors, this work is contributing to my PhD studies, so just acknowledging Stuart Rennie and Kamantri Moodley. So in terms of our work, when we started the study, we basically, just positioned it around the fact that we all know that during COVID-19, we were challenged as research ethics committees to balance the urgency of review of COVID-19 research with very careful considerations of risks and benefits. We, were also challenged by obviously having to work remotely, and that introduced a lot of procedural challenges around how we conducted our meetings, the different burdens that were placed on research ethics committees, members, chairs, as well as support and administrative staff. But during COVID-19, we also felt that there were some quite unique challenges that were unique to South African RECs. And some of these included, very historical mistrust of research. This is really seen in some of the playing out of research challenges, in social media. We also acknowledged the critical absence of the National Health Research Ethics Council and for the very sort of substantial initial period of COVID-19. And, although it seems like such a long time ago, we also were challenged with the additional complexities where, our initial early sort of national vaccine rollout was, through the phase 3B implementation studies. And, Sisonke seems like a lifetime ago, but it was a great challenge at the time. So we undertook some qualitative research to explore the perspectives and experiences of REC members around some of these challenges that they faced during COVID-19 research in South Africa. And just to go through a little bit of our methods, I won't sort of spend too much time on this, but we obtained ethics approval from Stellenbosch University as well as the UCT, as well as appropriate institutional gatekeeper approvals. We used purposive and participant-driven sampling to identify potential participants. And all of our participants really represented RECs at large academic health institutions. So quite a significant number at universities, and all of the REC participants in our study were actively involved in one way or another in the review of COVID-19 research. So we conducted in-depth interviews with 21 REC chairs and members from 7 RECs from around the country. Because we were doing our data collection sort of in the midst of COVID, we conducted our interviews remotely, and we continued with our interviews until we started to achieve data saturation. We spent quite a bit of time on analysis and obviously transcription and performed coding of interviews. We worked quite hard to develop a code book, and we tried to establish a good level of consensus and intercoder reliability. And we used an inductive approach to thematic analysis. And I learned a little bit on how to use Atlas TI during this process, which was also very, very interesting. So in terms of our results, we really identified 3 broad categories with a number of themes during our research. And I think, the findings were quite broad. And in talking with Prof. Anita before the session, we decided to focus, really on the factors, just to sort of briefly mention that impacted on REC sort of processes and procedures. But of course, a lot of our research has been around oops, sorry, I don't know how that happened. A lot of our research has been around some of the, more significant sort of research ethics issues and health equity issues. But we really felt that some of the more specific aspects that impacted on the REC functionings were also important to mention. So one of our main themes that we established with sort of various sub-themes was around coping during COVID-19. And one of our strong sort of themes was really a sense of solidarity. Many participants, sorry, I really don't know why my slides are jumping ahead. I'm sorry for that. So just in terms of our sort of strong sense of solidarity, many of our participants really identified that their contributions to research ethics work were, contribution to the public good during the pandemic. They felt that they were empowered through the work that they were doing, and that, especially for colleagues who weren't involved in frontline work, this was something where they were able to really have a strong sense of contribution. So there was a lot of positivity around that sense of solidarity. We also identified, a critical theme around leadership and support. And something that was really celebrated in our research was the infrastructure that we have with health research ethics committees, but also specifically the networking that occurred with chairs and the leadership that specific chairs provided to their research ethics committees during what was a very sort of uncertain time. And I think that the quotes I've included there, I feel a gentleness, a caring and willingness to help and make things smooth, it speaks really to what the ethics committees were trying to do at the time. Of course, the negative side of the REC work was really around the strain that research ethics committees were placed under during COVID-19. Again, it seems like a long time ago, but I'm sure we all remember sort of the urgency with which applications were put in front of us, the pressure to conduct rapid review, the additional pressure we sort of experienced because, we were being told that at UCT that, Stellenbosch approved a protocol 3 days ago. What's wrong with us for taking much longer to approve something? I'm just using that as an example, but there was this sort of constant pressure and comparison and real drive to approve research as quickly as possible. And certainly we also recognize that, with the strain of REC work, there was strong strain both on the committee members as well as the support staff for our committees. And I know Prof. Anita is going to explore this a little bit more in her presentation. But the one other important theme we just thought maybe good to mention, as part of this discussion, was really around the innovation of RECs during the sort of pandemic times. And things again sorry, I really have no idea why my slides are jumping ahead. It's obviously telling me to hurry up and finish. But the one sort of really important aspect that we focused on was the absolute ability of the RECs to maintain rigor of research ethics during the sort of urgency around COVID. So yes, we had to do things quicker. But there was a strong sense that because there were a lot of unknowns around COVID, that we really upheld the protection of participants and perhaps even asked investigators to be a bit stricter in terms of what they put in front of us. There was also a strong sense of the importance of relationship building and collaboration with, between RECs and obviously across institutions. And we recognize that RESCOP was one of those wonderful collaborations that arose from COVID-19, and perhaps to think about how we could celebrate those further. And then lastly, we just noticed that there was a strong need to promote knowledge exchange between RECs. And here, what came through is that, RECs don't necessarily have all the answers. And, developing a community of practice was something that was really seen as important. And to admit that, it's okay if we don't know all the answers, that we can be vulnerable, in our shared space as research ethics committee members and committees. And we don't have to have answers, but we know that we can seek advice from others and come up with answers together. So those are just some of our findings, but I hope will provide a sort of nice segue into Prof. Anita's presentation going forward. And really, just to highlight that COVID was and is, still, it's a massive time of numerous and significant sort of ethical complexities and challenges. We know that as RECs, we've shown we can be resilient, we can show we can be adaptable, but certainly we do recognize that there has been fatigue of reviewers, of our members, and we also need to develop mechanisms to really try strengthen relationships and collaborations between RECs. So that's it from me. Thank you very much. Just briefly my acknowledgements, and let me stop presenting. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Burgess. Marva, are you able to share your slides?
If you can just go off, Teresa. Thank you.
I have stopped sharing. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, it's not my day today. I tried to do it earlier for you, and
Do you like me to share the slides, Prof. Anita?
yeah, no, I'm trying. I don't know. Sorry.
Oh, okay, I can see your screen.
Okay, I'm just going to
I think you just need to enlarge the slides. Good to go.
sorry.
Prof. Anita, I think you just need to enlarge the slide or to put it in presenter mode. In slideshow mode, I mean.
Okay. That is the best I can do now, colleagues. And I have that. Can you see that, Clarissa?
Yes, we can see your slides, Prof. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So thank you so much, Teresa, for providing a very special backdrop. I think the essence of this specific session today is very much about turning inward and reflecting on who we are and what we do and what that does to us. And I believe that the COVID-19, in the time of COVID, and I also now remember as we talk today, when the article, and I remember then when we had a meeting at main campus, the moral distress that was in that room, that I felt from all of us was quite huge. So, and I think we sometimes don't always talk about that, and we don't recognize how important that is. Now, interesting, there's really very little written. I couldn't find actually anything that talks about HREC's inward and personal experiences as members in the time of COVID. There's stuff from clinical clinicians, and I've given you one example where this clinician said that I can't eat, I can't sleep, I have dreams, and I have only 3 teams: gasping for breath, wiping things down, somehow by accident being touched by somebody. And then she says, we can't go on, and we go on. We go back to work and back to this until the next case comes. So it was a very, very huge stressful situation. And we are all attending now to a historical global suffering and learning the limit of the grief that our hearts can bear. So I've taken a little bit liberty here and took the 3 themes that this clinician so beautifully stated in that publication. And I thought, if I have to think about HREC, and I'm kind of very honest, if we reflect on that time, it all happened so sudden. I mean, in a sense, we were all, as HREC members, gasping for breath. We were all part of the whole COVID situation, but now we become part of the very critical studies to make a difference to the health and well-being of our communities. And we just then had to think about, how much are we able to do and to help, and what will be our role. Then you try to wipe things down in a way, taking specific measures, to help and to deal with research that comes our way. Teresa has mentioned about the online meetings, the rapid reviews. These are a way that we wanted to just clean up what is happening. And then lastly, we were also the fear of being touched, and I mean this not in a literal sense, but if you think about sometimes when we reflect on studies, we were really worried about the ethical vulnerabilities that we are seeing and that we are placing in the interest of our participants. So then I thought, let me, because as you know, I really like philosophy, I see did these guys say something about this pan, lots of global thing, and that really, worked into the lives of all of us. And Schubach talked about to think in the eye of the storm. And there are basically three philosophical kind of thoughts that I could pick up in the literature. And the first one was about this uniting and dividing. And I think that also came through in some of the themes this morning. So there was very philosophically concerns about equality and justice. The pandemic doesn't equalize us, it doesn't communize us, but it actually emphasizes differences in injustice and inequalities because the virus lives and kills differently depending on the individual and the political body contaminants. And that was specifically, if you think about it, within the physical, psychosocial, economic, and so forth area. So in real life terms, it exacerbated the wealth gap, racism, anti-immigration, gender divide, and there's some work on women carrying the brunt within the time of COVID, and the deterioration of health and health, and this morning was mentioned about isolation, and that was one of the major things that created a lot of mental health discomfort, violence, and addictions. The other issue about uniting and dividing is who we are and where we are. Because in a sense, like in South Africa, within the Western Cape, we acted and reacted related to a global reality that came our way and that we had to deal with. And there was this to and fro between what is being thought of and decided and implemented globally versus locally. And then the immense price we paid for isolation, both physically and socially. And interesting, one of the philosophers actually said that kind of strengthened traits of individualism and narcissism, which I thought was quite a strong statement. The second one I also thought very interesting is where the researcher talked about exceptionalism. Now, HREC is talking about, everybody thinks they are exceptional. American, British people, the Greeks. So it is this whole, is a bit of a tongue in cheek about exceptionalism. But we know that exceptionalism is very much about a nation or a human or a time of competency that is seen as very special and extraordinary. But exceptionalism always supports superiority, separateness, and being treated differently. And I think we must keep this thought in our minds if we think about COVID-19, because in a way, COVID-19 research became exceptional, and we had to apply exceptional measures to support the research. And through that, push other studies on the background. Exception is always sometimes it's a bit of an optimistic thing. We think we control things and we focus on our successes and sometimes hide failure as a reality of exceptionalism. The third one, which you probably all know very well, but I thought I need to just mention it, and that is I can never pronounce it, but you can read it there. It's interesting what Bentham was one of the guys on this specific philosophical position. Says the question is not can they reason, it's not can they talk, but can they suffer. So it's very much focused on making the difference to our suffering and to our happiness. So the focus is on the end goal, the best for us. And that we used to see that mostly in military force application, in wars, like in Ukraine, for example. And it has a very complex relationship with justice and human rights, because who decides who is the best for whom? And what happened then is this enforced governmental involvement in even within health research ethics. If you think about this Sisonke study, very strong statements around that. So governments became very involved. They made rules and regulations and stuff around isolation, socioeconomic closures, contact tracing, and vaccines. And all of this, of course, influenced our work. It is not a distant reality. So in summary, so where were we and what were we seen to be? And I'm just very quickly going to highlight that. Researchers are unhappy with us. We can never do enough to pass enough. Who represents who in this process? Because we're very strong and that on communities and participants being visible and able to participate in this research ethics protocols. And that is very difficult, I know, in the time of COVID. But we also got quite negative feedback if we look at what was written in the media around, for example, the vaccine trial. What is the power of the HREC? I mean, it's a mandatory process that our research protocols be reviewed. But we have a limited, we have like an outside view and saying, okay, this is what we see you planning to do. This is how you consider the participants. And it sounds research, but it's future. So it's a very difficult thing. We always struggle with that. Then, of course, the COVID-19 research came initially out very strong in terms of the medical and natural sciences. And later on, of course, we saw more studies, epidemiological studies, qualitative research that slowly started trickling in. And then it was also this discussion around, so, you know, which kind of study is valid for rapid review and those discussions. There was also, some people thought more regulation, auditing and monitoring. I did to differ on that. And then in general, within faculties of medicine and health sciences, the expertise in qualitative research and mixed methods is still developing. Then what we saw, and there's some research from Africa, is that there was quite a proliferation in protocols, amendments, deviations, and terminations, and I would say even studies that kind of just disappeared off the radar. We initially had very limited guidance for research in emergency, so together with finding a way to rapid reviews and getting a system in place to do that online, away from one another, we also had to get guidance online and guidance in place, and that, as you know, always takes time, but we try. And then the rapid reviews process, as a chair, I have to say, it changed the amount and the intensity of work for chairs and members of the committees quite rapidly. Then the workflow increased, and I know Blanche can even give you examples of that in terms of how things changed. And we had to deal with this. It's a moral thing to prioritize what we will look at and to which studies can continue and which don't, and what would be our requirements. The duplications of reviews became a huge issue. You will remember that with some of the Sisonke trials, there was like 7 or 9 committees that looked at the same studies. We then tried to start working together with colleagues to make those reviews meaningful. We were then, in the time of COVID, really, we were worried that we couldn't monitor really, and we still worry about that. We were criticized that things are still too slow, even though we work kind of day and night to deliver. And we, as a constant really in all HREC work, it's very difficult to assess the performance of an HREC as a whole and of HREC members. we HREC tried to kind of, and I always think that's dangerous, but it was kind of, in tough times, you have to take tough stance. And so it seemed to me that the focus, as I think back, was very much on these four things. The interest of the participants.
5 minutes, Professor.
Okay. Sound research, selection, benefit risk, vulnerable groups, informed consent, compensation, and then monitoring of clinical trials. And I think Teresa talked about, were we really prepared? Were we competent? Did we work together enough? It slowly became better. Reciprocal reviews started coming into play. But also the question was, could we really let go of our standard roles and the way that we manage health research ethics review, the considerable administrative and logistical work? So I think in essence, the biggest thing for me is moral distress, which is quite a lot in the literature in different situations, but it's how we respond to morally challenging situations, which is we know that what's the right thing to do, but in a way we are hindered to do the right thing because of certain circumstances, because of priorities. And that creates anxiety, depression, and a sense of futility. So in terms of moral distress, sometimes we were angry, we were frustrated, we were anxious, we felt guilty, we felt powerless, we felt ineffective. It sometimes influenced our job satisfaction and maybe at times our performance. Some of us, when we talk to colleagues, sleeplessness, nausea, and so forth were quite recognizable. And I just want to highlight what moral distress is influenced, but it's very much also influenced by your role in the organization. Some of our HREC members were new, some of them are within the organization, maybe within not a senior position, but they have to look at studies from very senior colleagues who have, and that is quite difficult sometimes. So this I thought I must just quickly tell you. I read in the literature there was some disconcerting thoughts. There were committees that not ours, but said some research is better than nothing, the ETN phenomenon. Exceptions, okay. We can live with smaller sample size, unvalidated stuff, lack of randomization, and blindly. So we have broad evidence. Is that really better than nothing? And they refer to some clinical trial examples. So that, in a nutshell, is what I could find and share with you from my own experience. And then the question comes through: are you okay? Are we okay? And am I okay? In terms of what happens in very difficult circumstances with HREC members, both collectively and very individual. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Professor. I think Professor Anita and Prof. Teresa, you have asked a few participants to share their experiences. Shall we go into those discussions now?
So stop sharing. Yeah. We have, just to help some of the discussions today, we have put forward 4 questions, and depending on the time, we can see how far we can get with that. The first question really was about how did the pandemic affect the personal, self and significant others, and the professional as an academic and HREC members. And so I would really invite, we've asked Hester Berger from CPIT, I think Teresa maybe be the one from UCT, Christian from UWC, and Sumaya from FRC, and Marilise from Stellenbosch University.
The colleagues whose names have been mentioned, I actually activated your microphones and your cameras. So if you would like to share your comments and reflections, please go ahead. I think, Professor, we'll start with question 1 and 2, which is how did the COVID-19 pandemic affect the personal and the professional? And then I wonder if we can go in that order with the persons who have been asked to participate. That would be Prof. Easterberger.
Thank you, colleagues. Thank you. Sorry, I'm Dr. Easterberger. I'm the Manager of Research Integrity. And I sort of realized afterwards that in those times, I was actually not part of a ethics committee. I just started as the Manager of Research Integrity. I started in December 2019. And so soon after that, COVID happened. And so perhaps not a perspective from an ethics, research ethics committee member, but definitely as part of ethics and integrity at university during those times. It was, of course, very challenging, both wanting to develop my unit as well as to engage with colleagues who weren't available. And all of a sudden we are remote, and the only ways of communicating was emails. So lots of frustrations from my side, feeling lonely and unsupported, but also really just the innovative ways of how one sort of had to cope with all these things. That's just from my side. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Berger. I think next up we have Prof. Lynn Horn, Prof. Mark Blockman. If you can share your reflections, please.
Clarissa, I'm really sorry. I don't seem to be able to turn my camera on at the moment. I'm sorry about that. It's Teresa speaking. I just wanted to say that Mark Blockman unfortunately conveyed his apologies. He had an urgent meeting to attend to, so he's not with us in the room. But he did share some slides with me, and I think so reflecting on what he shared and reflecting, I guess, as being part of our HREC sort of exco, COVID was really just about being able, to deal with significant pressure. We were feeling pressured from many different directions. To keep our sort of research enterprise, going, so to speak, from an ethics point of view. Recognizing the challenges with our ethics office, needing to work remotely. And UCT is currently in the process of, with our research ethics committees shifting to an online system. So we were perhaps a little bit, less prepared than some of our sort of, like Stellenbosch, for example, who already had an online system, and maybe that shift, I don't know, it might have been a little bit easier. But yeah, so it was pressure around sort of keeping the operations going. Pressure around making quite significant decisions, I think. I think we all remember the notifications that we had to post, stating that research had been suspended. And that was something quite significant, something we certainly weren't prepared for, and never thought that we'd have to, deal with the consequences of having to make a decision of that nature. I think the positive aspects that Mark asked me to share were really the strong relationships that were formed. I mean, we really celebrated, RESCOP. We at Stellenbosch, sorry, I keep on saying at Stellenbosch, but at UCT, we celebrated our relationship, particularly with Stellenbosch, because of the nature of health research that we were being asked to review. And being able to have, wonderful relationships with Prof. Anita, Blanche, especially, that was a massive sense of security for us, that we weren't in it alone. And I think that was sort of our really important reflection. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Teresa, for sharing on behalf of UCT. I wonder, Prof. Lynn Horn, do you have anything to add to that?
Hi. No, not really. I don't sit on the Health Research Ethics Committee. I was certainly aware that it was a really fraught time and our colleagues were under a huge amount of pressure. And I think, from a research integrity point of view, there were also, I think, just because people were sort of really under pressure to get things out. So there were some things that were of concern, but yeah, nothing really further to add. Thanks.
Thank you, Lynn. And then we have Dr. Marlies Berger from Stellenbosch University.
Thanks, Clarissa. So I don't have really much to add. I echo everything that all the other members have mentioned. I think the one thing that hasn't been mentioned was kind of the fallout of what happened during the rapid reviews that we've undertaken during COVID, and that was that it really led to expectations from researchers. They saw that there can be a quick turnaround time, and now that has become an expectation. And I think that is also something that's quite important to consider, because yes, we had to find answers to questions that there were no answers for. There were, I personally don't feel, and I think this was reflected at a previous meeting, I can't remember which one, where maybe the HREC meeting earlier this year, where a lot of recs were commenting on how they felt pressured, but the unanimous thought in the end was that we didn't allow it to influence the decision-making processes, even though there were pressures. People had to leave other stuff. We struggled to get reviewers. There weren't clinicians available because they were all hands deep and knee deep in COVID cases. So all these pressures and all these things, are true from our side as well. But I think the big thing is that now there's that expectation of recs to do things within 2 or 3 days or 2 or 3 weeks, where normally it would take much longer. And researchers don't understand that, it was a very exceptional time. And I think that is something that we struggle to kind of deal with. I'm interested to hear if colleagues from other institutions have the same expectations from their researchers.
Clarissa, if I may add, I think that's a really, such an important point, Marlies, and completely agree. We certainly created a strong expectation that we could turn around everything, rapidly. So yes, that sort of push of why is something now sort of sitting at a full committee meeting? Why can't we review it in a shorter turnaround time? It has definitely been a sort of negative, if you like, result of the rapid review process.
Go ahead, Lynn.
Sorry, Clarissa, was that me?
Yes, you raised your hand.
Yes, thank you. And thank you very much, Anita and Teresa. I know from all my years on the REC and chairing the REC that this was always a very important issue for you, the well-being of the REC members, even before COVID, Anita. I just want to say that, of course, we cannot always compare the experiences of HREC with that of the humanities RECs, because your clients, if you may, were still, as we just heard, knee deep in work and working with COVID patients. For in a certain sense, for us, it was easier because when we had level 1 restrictions, we just said no in-person data collection, but also on our side, also the number of applications increased considerably. We had, instead of our 1 monthly meeting, we had 2 monthly meetings. Everything that where there's any where there was any indication of collecting data in person was immediately medium risk, and we required all these mitigation protocols. I just want to also just give a shout out to our coordinators on the RECs. I think that, you know, in a lot of cases, you know, we had a lot of reviews to do, but I think that they bore the brunt of the increase, not only in processing all the applications, but also in answering all the questions that was put to them, and in getting the word out. I remember at one stage we had to continually change our decision on COVID mitigations as the levels of the lockdown differed. So just as I said, just a shout out to them as well. I was often during COVID very grateful that I am not the coordinator and rather the chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Among my colleagues, I see there's a few questions, quite some activity in the chat. There's a question by Dr. Swart regarding the situation for HREC in the exceptional circumstances of COVID. Sounds like it was really higher. What can we do moving forward under less exceptional circumstances to safeguard the health and well-being of our REC members and our REC staff? And I think that is the critical question we have to ask ourselves. And I also see that we have questions from Dr. Koza asking about whether there were significant resignations on the RECs during COVID-19. And Dr. Hodinot saying that having come through the storm, what have we learned that we can carry forward? Pre-COVID in the TB program, the idea of sending people their TB test results via SMS or offering multi-month dispensing was met with much reticence. Post-COVID, these are now normative. If we think how we could do things better, it's just a matter of resources, capacities, and attitudinal shifts. And Dr. Blom Pretorius agreeing with Lynn about acknowledging the role of ethics office staff. I wonder, Prof. Anita, Prof. Teresa, would you like to comment on the questions of how do we now go forward? What should we think about to protect our REC members and our REC staff?
Thank you so much, Clarissa, and thank you, colleagues, for such meaningful contributions, because that is always the first prize, is what have we learned? And I think Dr. Hodinot is absolutely correct that there is an attitudinal shift, and I think we should work on that even harder. I believe that the systems and processes it still is a work in progress. The team, I actually have to say that in the time of COVID, the team cohesion of the HREC members for me was so special. And I did not see an increase that I know of in resignations. To the contrary, people were really there and trying their absolute best to participate in extraordinary meetings. But I believe that does take its toll, and I would think that there is developmental and educational and supportive work can do on ethical resilience for healthcare committees. And I think that can be quite a lovely project, I believe, for the different universities maybe to share or work together on in how to better support our members. Because yes, we were in the eye of the storm. The storm is kind of away, although I'm not so sure. But in these day and times, I think different storms and different realities will come up that will have this kind of impact on us all. Thank you. Teresa?
Yes, thanks so much. So very interesting questions, and thanks so much for the wonderful contributions. I agree with Prof. Anita. Interestingly, at UCT we didn't have any resignations, and sorry, again, I can only speak for our Human Research Ethics Committee in Health Sciences. Lynn might be able to comment on, if she's aware of resignations across any of our other sort of faculty ethics committees. So yeah, we didn't see any resignations. I think what we did, start to see, and it kind of, relates to what Prof. Anita was saying around resilience, is so we definitely started to see that our committee members were getting tired, particularly towards the end of our sort of rapid review as we were phasing it out. I think especially when we perhaps got rushed submissions to the HREC. Those were generally, in the height of COVID, dealt with very patiently, but towards the end of COVID, I think our sort of capacity to sort of manage rushed submissions was perhaps reduced. I think the other interesting thing about ethics committees in academic institutions is that they really are working committees. And it's interesting because you require the contributions of the members for the committee to be functional. And certainly, again, what we started to see, as COVID progressed, and certainly even this year, is it's becoming a little bit harder, to find people to review. And so we might not be seeing resignations, but perhaps we are seeing fatigue. How to counter that? I think it's, that's a tough one within our sort of institutional environments. It would be great if, ethics reviews were more readily recognized. For example, in promotion criteria, we haven't quite got that right at UCT. I'd be interested to hear, what other colleagues thought. We've sort of discussed many times whether we could, have a sense of getting a CPD points for reviewers to encourage reviews. Again, something we haven't really been able to progress with. And really, I think that sort of importance of resilience and knowing that, if you sort of on a committee, the workload that can be expected is quite important, and we perhaps are navigating that as we should be. I think the other thing is we've recognized, a lot of the chat has spoken about things that have shifted. And I think we have a lot of catching up to do. So, things around, electronic consent processes, telephonic consent, using, social media, things like, I see Marlise's comment around virtual research visits. Those are all challenging that we're a little bit behind in terms of our process, and it would be great, to kind of have a community of practice where we work on these aspects together, I think, to sort of help us all move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Teresa. And I see that we have lots of agreement in the chat as well. Prof. Berger saying that we had members taking a leave of absence, and that REC members are not serving on the committees because they have nothing better to do, but that they actually want to help researchers and want to enhance research, and that a committee is not that the REC is not a committee you simply serve on to tick a box on your CV. And then we also have more comments. Prof. Pretoria is saying, I do believe that it's a tough balancing act and a moral dilemma of taking much needed clinical expertise in review research. And then Mr. Manuel asking, what role, if any, did review fatigue impact on the overall rigor of these deliberations? Very important question. And how has this impacted the reviewers in terms of scientific rigor and their own mental health prospects? Colleagues, we've gone well over time, but I see everyone is still around. So, and I think it is because this is such an important topic to discuss. And I think it's definitely something that we should continue discussing at forthcoming regional events, and really to discuss what kind of practical changes, incentives, or accommodations that we can we can use or add to alleviate pressure on our REC members and really just to take care of ourselves in this very demanding and often what I've heard committee members say, thankless role we play in our institutions. I just want to ask my presenters, Prof. Anita, Prof. Burgess, is there anything else that you would like to add just to end off? And then I'll hand over to Prof. Len Hansen to end off this very insightful workshop, and then also just to give the handover officially. Thank you.
Oh, thanks so much. So just from my side, Clarissa, just to say thank you to you. You know, I think what is always exceptional for me about, and sorry, I'm using the word exceptional after Prof. Anita's spoken about this, but what is always exceptional for me working with Research Ethics Committee members is, you know, yes, it sometimes can be a very thankless task, you know, but the level of commitment and, you know, so Mr. Emmanuel's question around, you know, did fatigue impact rigor? You know, I think because it really, you know, Prof. Anita spoke about how the committees pulled together. There really was like a collaborative, you know, commitment to making sure that we didn't get tired. In fact, you know, even when we were being told Stellenbosch is still so much faster than you, you know, so I think that is something that we can be really, fortunate for, and I just count myself exceptionally lucky to be in this wonderful community of individuals. Thanks.
Yeah, I absolutely support Teresa and Clarissa what you've said, and I also think about the issue in the chat around the fatigue and the influence on deliberations, especially online and going on for quite some time, complex reviews, if you think about some of them. And it was something that I as a chair sometimes was concerned about. And then, you know, but I also know everybody is doing the best they can with what they have within the moment. So, and as Lena said, probably we have made mistakes, probably could have done some reviews better or some, you know, support to researchers. But I have to also say that the researchers sometimes really placed, you know, quite a lot of pressure on HRECs via emails, by using specific clouds and position. And those are the things that worried me, I think, in the end. And I also think that the second thing I want to say is we have to be very sensitive around the effect of what we're doing, the personal cost. We need to think about that. After COVID, I felt, whew, you know, I need a break, and a dozen Kit Kats. It was just really quite intense. So we have to work on, we have to look at ways to actually acknowledge and reflect on what it does to us. So because if you know, you can work with it, you can work on it together, we can share, and we can help to make things better. And I know specifically, Blanche, you have also done stuff in terms of acknowledgement and recognition, which I think is such an important thing to do. Thanks, Clarissa.
Thank you, Prof. Anita. Thank you, Prof. Teresa. I think you have left us with a lot of things to think about on our respective regs in terms of how we can take care and safeguard our REC members and our reg staff. So this conversation will certainly continue within our reg circles. I think, Prof. Hansen, will you end us off, please?
Thank you very much, Clarissa, and thank you, colleagues, for a wonderful session. Yes, I'll be short and sweet with the thank yous. First of all, to all our presenters, thank you for sharing your experiences and your expertise with us. To me, it was wonderful to listen to all the experiences, and to also realize that somewhere in all that bunch of experiences, we also do things you know, in a good way and a correct way on our REC. Thank you also to our facilitators, to Bronwyn, to Ilana, and to Clarissa. And of course, up to Clarissa and Aidan, our administrative people, but in more senses than one, the most experienced and the most capable of the members of the REC. So thank you very, very much, Clarissa and Aidan, for putting all of this together, for organizing right from the beginning, and also for following up, colleagues. Just a reminder of those CBD points, and also about the evaluation form that will be coming your way. And with that, we have now moved beyond the point of full circle. Stellenbosch was the first to present or to host these annual workshops, and so next year we will pass on the baton to UCT. And Teresa, apparently I have to ask your permission, or I have to ask you, are you willing to take over next year?
So Len, Clarissa, Aidan, just a massive thank you. You've left us very large shoes to fill in the next round of workshops. But of course, thank you to Stellenbosch for starting this tradition. It is wonderful that it's come full circle, and that we'll be able to continue. And this is a firm event on our calendar, and we look forward to hosting and to great collaboration going forward. So thank you very, very much.
Great, thank you very much. And colleagues, a pleasant afternoon to all of you. See you all next year at UCT.